Hello everybody, it's me, GhostCritic, and I've finally done it. Here we are with my Q&A video to celebrate 7 years here on YouTube, and I want to say thank you to everyone who contributed questions to this video. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to everybody that has been subscribed to my channel over the 7 years that I've been doing these crazy comic book videos, giving you my thoughts, reviews, opinions, showing off my comic book hauls, question of the day videos. What else did I used to do? Oh, there's so many. There's over 850 videos going on my channel, so if you want to check back at my history of YouTube, then please just drop in there and help yourselves. But this video is all about the questions and hopefully some answers that will keep you entertained. Before I do, just thank you to everyone who has been here and kept me sane in some respects on my comic book journey. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a few breaks along the way, usually because of real life forcing me down and making me do things that I don't want to do, and I'd much rather be here on YouTube talking to all of you, making some hopefully good content. But hopefully another 7 years time I'll still be doing this and you'll still all be watching. We shall see. Right, so there are 2 pages full of questions that I need to answer, and I'm going to kick off first with Nelson Cavallo, who asked 2 separate questions, but they were kind of along the same vein. The first one was, how do you pick what books to read? Now this one, it's a lot easier for me to pick out books now because I've been collecting comic books for so long. I know writers, I know artists, I know characters, and I've become familiar with what they can do and what they can put down on the page. So it's a lot easier for me to go, well, say that's a Rick Remender book, that is going to be good and I'm going to want to pick it up and I'm going to love it. And obviously everything he's doing at Image at the moment, I am just digging so much. But when you first start out in comic books, I guess it's a lot tougher because you're faced with this huge wall of comic books. They're all vying for your attention and it can get a little bit overwhelming. But I always think that, you know, just draw on what you like. Just in general, we all watch TV pretty much. I'm sure we've all got a television and we're all hooked on the latest TV series, or we've just watched a great movie. And just draw influences from those things that you like and those genres to kind of ferret out the books that are instantly going to appeal to you. They may not be written by the best people, they may not be drawn by the best people, but at least you'll enjoy it because of the genre. And then as you build up your kind of, I guess, a repertoire of titles and artists and writers, then you can narrow down or even expand your horizons of what you like and what you don't like. And I think that's a lot of it. It's trial and error when you first start getting comics, but you will get there, and hopefully, and I think more so now than in the past, there are a lot of comic book stores out there with owners who are only too pleased to help you out, because our local comic book stores, you know, they need all the custom they can get. They're kind of vying for customers from the likes of, you know, websites, Amazon and all those, so they're going to want to keep you there and provide you hopefully with the best customer service. So if you're not too shy, go and ask the people that are running that store. They should at least know what they're talking about, and like I said, you tell them what you like in general, and hopefully they can point you to books that will hopefully appeal to you. Nelson also asked me, how do you find out about the books? I used to, and I still do, kind of dip in and out occasionally on websites. like Newsarama, Comics Alliance, which unfortunately has, I guess you could say, folded now. It's no longer being updated. But the majority of books I actually find from the actual advertisements through the books. The image books always have them at the back, and you see, oh, that's coming out, and obviously, just like my last answer, you see it's from someone familiar that you know has done good work in the past, or it might just be a genre of comics that you like, or that kind of storylines, whether it be sci-fi, fantasy, crime, romance, all sorts of stuff. You're instantly drawn to it. So those are the kind of two areas, more the advertisements, and also of course word of mouth. There are so many books that I tend to miss out on and have to rush back out and go and get, because people here on YouTube say, I bought this week and it looks like it's going to be really good, or it was really good, and they tell me why, and I go, that's something I am interested in. So YouTube and the whole comic book community we have here are a great resource for finding out about new books, and I hope I'm one of those people that tell you these things as well, because there are times, I pick up a book and I'm not so sure, but then when I read it I'm just so surprised and excited about it. My next question came from Sleepy Reader 666, our good friend Damien, and he was a bit greedy. He asked 3 questions, but I never put a limit on it. So Damien first asked me, have you read any digital comics this year? No, not really in the sense that I've bought any. Occasionally people send me digital copies of very, very, very independent titles that they want me perhaps to do videos of occasionally, and I may read them and decide whether I want to do anything with them, but it just does nothing for me. I need that physicality of the paper, the turning of the pages, especially with back issues, the smell of them. It just brings back so much nostalgia of years gone by and comic book collecting, that digital comics just can't compete with that. However, I understand, and I hope everyone else does, that comic books will eventually all go digital. It's a certainty. Of that I am 100% sure. It won't happen this year, it won't happen in the next few years. 5, 6, 7 years down the line, I do think that it will become the norm. And you may see from the more independent, that when I'm talking independent, I'm not talking Image or Dark Horse or Boom Studios, I'm talking about the true independent comic book publishers will be the only ones left, and it'll become, again, I think it'll come full circle and it'll be a very underground thing, but the minute everything else goes digital is the minute I stop buying comic books, and I'll just concentrate on all the back issue stuff. I just don't get on with them at all. His second question was, if money and space was no object, how many comics would you want to get each week? And I think I should add a little caveat onto that as well, is if time was no object. I'm often left in awe of Travis, Oddfellow's Thoughts, New Comic Book Day videos, where he has, 30 odd books that he's picked up in a week. I mean, I think I'll probably get, the most I will get is half of that, maybe 15, and I'm somewhat overwhelmed. I don't think it's more the quantity of books that I'd like to get, but I know that I've missed out on so many others that I may or may not go to and trade. Stuff like Harrow County, the one from Jeff Lemire that's on Dark Horse, is it Black Hammer? I think it's Black Hammer. I missed out on that. I don't know why I didn't pick up that, because it was Jeff Lemire. Stuff like Manifest Destiny. There's a lot of Image books that all came out, they love churning out their #1s, and there is a moment where I have to go, one, do I actually want to get this? Two, can I actually afford it? But yes, if money in space was no object, I'm sure I'd be collecting a lot more. And it's not just the independents either. DC and Marvel, there's a lot of titles there that I would at least try. Certainly over at DC, you see, for those people who have watched my videos, they know that I tried out 2 new titles, The Flash and Wonder Woman, that I've never collected before, and I'm really enjoying those. But I would have liked to try a couple more. I've heard really great things about Nightwing. I would have liked to have got onto that. I picked up the first issue of Batwoman, but wasn't overly impressed with it, to be fair, so I kind of just left that behind. It would have been nice to give that a bit more try, but I guess it does come down to money a lot of the times, and if it's a case of buying a couple of new number ones to paying off my credit cards quicker, then I'm afraid my credit cards take precedent, unfortunately. But you know, once they've all gone, I've got more spare cash and more chance to try out new things. So I would certainly like to see my weeks be more spread out. If you've been watching my videos for the last few weeks, I seem to have 2 really big heavy weeks where the majority of the comic books I collect are all clumped into those 2 weeks, and then the kind of bookend of the months are very small, and just spread them out a little bit. His final question is, and this is off the back of me reading a lot of Conan comic books at the moment, is have you ever read any Robert E. Howard? For shame, I haven't, though it's something I would like to do sometime in the future. I used to read lots, like novels, and seem to have so much time to do it in, and nowadays it is literally comic books engulf my life, and that's all I've got time to read. But however, hopefully later on in the future I'll manage to do that. And actually 4 questions he asked, and it was kind of Conan centric on this, was, do you side with civilization or the barbarians? Which is actually a very interesting question, because although kind of like the barbarians by their very nature are barbaric, they're bloodthirsty, they're violent, they have this very moralistic code that they stick to. They kind of look after each other, and despite the fact that they live in such hardship and such hard conditions, they all get together and they work together to make their lives, if only a fraction, easier. But then when you look at civilization, which clearly has the more comfortable time, they're not all working together. They're all out for number one themselves, and they are seen as very amoral. They're all kind of the devious nature. They're all like thieving off each other and gathering the wealth just for themselves. So just by that alone, I have to say, the barbarians, they are who I side with. So Edward2962 asked a very interesting question about my comic book collecting habits, and he asked, do you get more enjoyment from filling in holes in your back issue collection, or from discovering new current titles that you like? 2 very distinct and different ways of collecting comic books, and as much as I enjoy them both, if I'm honest with myself, I have to say that I enjoy the journey, and that's part of the joy of it, in collecting the back issues and filling in those runs of comic book series gone by, because you never know what you're going to find. When you get in the new titles, you know they're coming out, and yes, there is that kind of element and anticipation of picking up that first new number one and, you know, hoping it's going to be good. But when you go out, you know, on your little road trips, when you go into these charity shops, comic book stores that you've never been in before, and you see these rows and rows of comic book boxes, you don't know what's in them. You don't know if you're going to find that issue that's eluded you for so long. I'm still looking for issue 99 of Exiles. Not the greatest run in the world, you know, it's not kind of like, you know, defying any kind of storylines and pushing the comic book medium any, but it was a series that I loved and got entertained from. But issue 99, I can't find it anywhere. I will eventually find it, and it'll be in one of those long boxes. It'll be one of those bargain bins soon enough, and I will get it. And the thrill and the enjoyment, and almost to the point of feeling proud of yourself that you've actually completed a whole run, is infinitely more exciting and full of joy than just going down to the comic book shop and getting your pull list, which may or may not have some new books in it. Now, Betty Boulian asked me 2 questions, and they were all about one of my favourite comic book families. It's of course the Fantastic Four. And they asked, how many issues of Fantastic Four do you have? And what's the oldest? So I had to go on my comic book database and add up all the volumes that have been of Fantastic Four, all of the kind of mini-series, the one-shots, the offshoots, and I think I've got roughly between 350 and 400 issues of Fantastic Four altogether. Now my oldest one, I get to hold something up. I've got an example just to prove to you that I have it. It's not in very good shape, but it is issue number 37 of Fantastic Four, Behold a Distant Star. I don't know if you can quite see, but it's been sellotaped down here. It's got creases all over the place, but I think it cost me about £2 perhaps, maybe about that. I've got lot nicer ones from the earlier era of Fantastic Four, the kind of silver age of them, and I do have a video showing the all my 60s Fantastic Four issues, which is back in a video which you can find. I think it's just called The Collection, Fantastic Four the 60s, and I think the 70s as well I added in there as well, so you can see all my earlier copies on another video, but this one is my earliest one. Another question with a bit of show and tell attached to it came from Jared Osborne, and he asked me what 5 comics series storylines you've read but you want to read again. Now, I automatically went to the first 5, and then I thought, well, I always show these, so I'm going to show them very quickly, but these are the books that are always by my bedside table, and I love reading just before I go to bed, and they just keep coming back and back, and I reread them and reread them because I just love them. They bring me joy and entertainment, and that is Batman, Nightfall, Alan Moore's Saga of the Swamp Thing, Constantine Hellblazer, the original Vertigo series, Neil Gaiman's The Books of Magic, and of course my favourite comic book series of all time, which I've read, I don't even know how many times, but Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. They are always there, and I reread and reread them. But there are some titles that I've read but I would like to go back to given the time. So I picked some extra 5 books out that I've read but would like to go back to. Beginning with Why the Last Man, Brian K. Vaughan's future story, though it was set in apparently 2002, of a world where every single man dies on the same day except one, him and his monkey. But it was a great Vertigo title. You'll see a lot of these are Vertigo titles, to be fair, but I really enjoyed reading them. But it's one of those books that I feel I get more enjoyment now I'm a little bit older and I'm a bit more wiser, I guess, and kind of read this at a nice pace rather than you know, churning through them like I did when I first read them. Same with this one. This is Brian Azzarello and Edward Risso's 100 Bullets. I bought these from my comic book store in a sale. My comic book guy had basically bought them off someone who wanted to sell them, and I just said, put them all aside for me, I'll pick them up as and when. And I used to buy them off him in like 2 or 3s, and I would just like read right through them. But there's a lot going on in this book with all the kind of families in there. It's very crime noir stuff, and I think I read them a little bit too fast to fully appreciate the great storytelling that Brian Azzarello put in this book. So that's another book I'd like to come back to. The last of the Vertigo books, I think, yes, is Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth, a post-apocalyptic universe where the human race has pretty much been decimated, and what you have are these kind of mutated humans now with kind of antlers coming out of their head, like our main character here, piggy noses. They're almost anthropomorphic, but not in the true sense. And it's the journey and the story of finding out how this all happened, and it was a great book. And I have to say, one of the most satisfying endings to a series I've read in quite some time. When I got to the last volume of this book, I was very wary about how Jeff Lemire was going to wrap all this up, but it was perfect. I enjoyed this book a great deal, so another one I want to come back to. A series that I haven't actually even finished yet. I think I've got another trade of this to buy, but definitely I'll want to come back and read it, is Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, Lock and Key. Very much of the kind of horror genre. This is called Welcome to Lovecraft, and it does have that kind of Lovecraftian feel about it. But I love this. Everything that I've read so far of this I've really enjoyed. Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez certainly played around with the horror genre, both in the writing and in the actual visual element of this. There are so many different kind of ways that Gabriel Rodriguez drew this book in many very different styles, but always staying true to the kind of the horror vibe of this book. Really like it. Joe Hill, son of Stephen King, so he's definitely comes from a good stable of horror book writers. Great stuff. And finally, again, another one of these books that I came to very, very late on, so I bought a lot of them and bought a lot of them in succession, and I read through them very quickly, so I'd like to go back and read them at a more leisurely pace, is Matt Kint's Mind Management. A great kind of, I suppose you could call it a murder mystery in some ways, but a different way of, I guess, looking at kind of mutant superpowers, seen from a very different angle, and definitely different kinds of power sets. They use these to control, I guess, that at least the baddies do, society and civilization in general, using these almost kind of like mutant powers. But there's this kind of mystery behind it all about kind of the cycle that this lady on the front has to live through, apparently again and again. But just a great, thrilling book, and definitely well worth picking up, and so cheap. I mean, this is good old hardback, but they are so cheap for what you get, so definitely go pick up a Mind Management. Now, Gotham Central, next question from them, asked me, who inspired you to start a YouTube channel and the format you adopted? To be absolutely honest, I can't say anyone actually inspired me to do my YouTube channel. I wasn't so naive to think that people weren't already doing this on YouTube, but I come from reading comic books as a very... I don't use the word isolated, more of a kind of a lonely endeavour and pursuit and hobby. I didn't even really talk to the manager of the comic book shop back then, because it's changed hands since. I think he barely spoke to me for a couple of years, and then actually said my name as I came up and paid for my comic books. So there was no one to talk to. I looked at kind of website forums, and I hated reading them. They were such an awful place that I really didn't want to join in. They were really nasty to each other, to be honest. There was no fun about it. There was no enjoyment. There was no embracing the commonality of their shared comic book hobby. So I decided, one day, because I was probably bored, to be honest, I thought, and I got myself a new camera of sorts, and I decided to do a video. And for those of you who've seen my very first video, it's still up there. It's terrible. The lighting's awful. I didn't even have any new comic books to show, because at the time there was that volcanic eruption that was sending ash all over the place and stopping flights and stuff, so the comic books weren't coming over. But it's like, as soon as I'd done that video, I started looking around and saw lots of people, obvious names: Tim, Howler Mouse, Custom Bromstar, Scott, Hans, Captain Strangelife. He called himself Agent 42Q, now he's Wednesday's Serial. Back then, they were like the kind of four main people that I first picked up on, saw what they were doing, and they informed my comic book reading a great deal right at the very beginning. And then I just watched any YouTuber that just kind of looked directly into a comic book to, I've got to say, make myself feel more at ease, because back then I did feel it very strange, and it was difficult to connect because I felt stupid. I'm talking in a room on my own, straight into this camera, and it just felt weird. I hope I feel as though I've got better at that, and it doesn't feel so ridiculous and stupid. And I know that I'm talking to a lot of you out there who watch my videos regularly, because you thumb them up, you subscribed, you commented, and it's just a kind of evolution from there of what people wanted to see, because I asked, what do you want me to do, give me suggestions, and also to what I want to do. I keep saying this, and I really need to give myself a kick up the ass, but there is a series of videos that I'm dying to do, but I am just being incredibly lazy at the moment and not getting on with it. But I will eventually, because it's something I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. I don't want to say anything just in case it doesn't happen, but it will. So that's kind of what happened at the very beginning of my YouTube life. Next on my list of questions came from Raymond Tango, who wanted recommendations that are written and drawn by just one person. And he actually gave me a lot of the artists and writers that I was going to pick. You gave me the Darwin Cooks, you gave me the Jack Kirbys and others. I was like, damn, what am I going to pick? So I looked throughout all my my trades and my hardbacks, and I think I found 3 suggestions. One's a little bit of a cheat because he does have a little help, but it's predominantly him. But I've got 3 suggestions for you, and hopefully you'll give them a try, because they are books that I've really enjoyed in the past. The first one was an original graphic novel by the same person who brought you Scott Pilgrim, and that's Brian Lee O'Malley's Seconds. Hardback from, who did this? I can't even remember who did this. I'll find out later, but yes, same guy who brought you Scott Pilgrim Saves the World. And it's about this young girl, well, it's a woman really, but the way Brian Lee O'Malley draws her, she looks almost infantile, but she kind of runs her own business. And it's almost this kind of slice of life story, but it has this fantastical element to it where she can eat this kind of magical mushroom, go back in time and change a decision that she's made in the past that probably didn't go as well as she hoped. And it's that kind of concept of maybe you shouldn't change things, because if you do, you might make them even worse. But it's a great storyline. It has Brian Lee O'Malley's typical kind of very indie, hip and cool looking art. He puts so much detail into a lot of the work, but I just really enjoyed it. I tried so hard not to read this all in one go, because I wanted to pace this out because it was so good, but I read it all in a night. A great little book here from Brian Lee O'Malley. He's the kind of cheater on this, because I think he had a little bit of help from Jason Fisher on this, who's put down as the drawing assistant, whatever that means. The other book is, and this was actually recommended to me years and years ago by Scott Custom Bromstar. He put it on one of his videos where he was showing everything on his shelves of trades, and that was Brandon Graham's King City, which is this fantastic collection of... It's very difficult to describe because it's very non-linear storytelling, which is one of Brandon Graham's kind of things he does. But there is a story in there, and it's based on, you can just see him in the background, this character here, and I guess his pet cat. But the cat, if you inject it, I guess with drugs, it becomes anything that you want it to be. And again, if you've ever seen Brandon Graham's work, it is this kind of very indie, underground, hip kind of art style. But what he does, he packs so much into the pages. His cityscapes, you can just look at the page for like much longer than you would expect to, and you would find so much detail and so many kind of like little Easter eggs, I guess you'd call them. So much detail, and it's a very psychedelic, almost like an acid trip, despite it's black and white. But there is so much to this book, and I lapped it up, and I think this is the thing that got me really into Brandon Graham and everything that he put out afterwards. And I still got to find his trade of a book called Walrus. I keep meaning to pick that up, but that will come eventually. But great book nonetheless. And finally, definitely the one if you haven't already, again, this is another recommendation from fellow YouTuber Tim Howlermouse. He was always going on about this character and how much it meant to him. He just had so many videos about it, and I was like, right, I'll take the plunge, I'm going to do it. But of course I had to do it and go big with it, and it is The Goon by Eric Powell. I'm collecting them in these big, huge library editions, which again, despite the size, hardback, glorious glossy pages inside, are very well priced. But the great thing about The Goon is it's genre defying. It will take you anywhere. It's done horror, it's done sci-fi, it's done crime, it's done romance, there's adventure, you know, there's vampires, there's zombies, there's kind of wizards and warlocks, there's big huge mechanical robots, there's mud monsters, there's gypsies, there's magic, there's dynamite. There's so much packed into just these 4 volumes that I've already got. And it's just so fantastic. I mean, if we just look at a few pages, so beautifully drawn and painted, full of dark humour in this as well, but also it can get very emotional and tragic. but just a fantastic series, which another one of those ones that I wish I'd gotten into much sooner. But these are a great way to read these on the kind of oversized glossy pages. So those are 3 recommendations from me. Next question comes from Anthony Thurman, and he asked me, what variants do you collect? Now, I'm not going to say what you can and can't collect. If variants are your thing, then go out and buy them, enjoy them, and keep them and sell them on, put them on eBay, whatever, I don't care. However, variants, I don't see the appeal of them. I really don't. Apart from pure scarcity and rarity, they're just the cover of a page that, you know, you can look at on your computer and enjoy it for what they are, because the insides are exactly the same as the copy that I get that's got the regular cover on. I just don't get it. Are these hip hop ones, the action figure ones, making all of them with Gwenpool on, or Wolverine, or Deadpool? It's just a marketing gimmick, which I find very, I use the word unpleasant, I guess. It's just trying to get more money out of you for one page. It's not, if it was like original artwork, you know, go out and buy that. But just to have a copy that maybe only 500 exist in the world, if that's your thing, then that's your thing, do it. But any variants that I do have in my comic book collection have been bought by either accident, they're like second printing variant covers, or they've been in a bargain bin for like 50p or £1. I'm not saying that I don't have them in there, but I haven't actively gone out to go and get them. So Stan Stacey Gallagher asked me, has your love for comics grown over the years or stayed the same? Ooh, tough but interesting question. It's certainly changed. When I first kind of seriously started buying comics and getting back into, I should say, the hobby of comic book collecting, I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't feel as though I could speak to my comic book guy and ask him, you know, what's the deal? So I kind of had to go back to what I'd previously collected and given away or lost or sold, and just step in there and then just try any amount of books. And there was that sense of excitement about it. I didn't know what I was picking up. When I kind of got back into comics again, it was kind of the very, I would say the early years of Image, but probably 5 years, probably maybe a bit less into Image, and all the weird and wonderful books they were bringing out, which if you think solicitations and books coming out on time was bad, now with all their hiatuses and stuff, you need to go back to the early years of Image, because you'd be lucky if you saw 3 issues of a comic book series and it ever came back again, let alone waiting 3 or 4 months down the line for the next issue. So it was a very hit and miss time there. So I guess now that, you know, Image are such a big contender now in the comic book industry, it does make it easier. But I think my love certainly has grown for the comic books. You only have to look, you can see behind me all of these boxes. My quantity, if not perhaps the quality, has certainly taken over my home a lot more than previously. I guess it's just a different way of looking at it now. Now I'm older and hopefully wiser and more experienced. I know what should be good and what I know isn't going to be good. And I guess there's that kind of, you could say that childlike innocence from previous times I've been collecting comics has been diminished somewhat. There are still titles that make me a little bit giddy and excited because of past experiences with them. But I think there's a lot more cynicism in my appreciation and enjoyment of it, which sometimes often gets in the way of the enjoyment, which is what I'm predominantly about when I'm buying comics. I mean, this is an expensive hobby. I spend up to and over £100 a month on comic books, which I just think, when I just say it out loud and I listen to myself say that, it's a crazy amount. The things I could do with £100, and I'm buying comic books. Comic books. £100. It's still seeping in. But the fun is still there. I wouldn't do it otherwise. I'm not just collecting for collecting's sake. I know that probably about 80% of the books behind me are monetarily, financially worthless. I mean, the majority of them, I bought them really cheap because I'm a cheap person. I will try and find a deal wherever I can find it. I'm not buying this as like a future nest egg. These are not going to get me through my pensionable years if I get that far. I buy them because I love them, I enjoy them, the escapism that takes me out of the humdrum normal life that we all have to endure week in, week out. So it's just a different kind of enjoyment, but still, I love my comics. Edgar Benito, thank you very much for your question. He asked me, how do you feel about the MCU DCEU movies, and what would you like to see adapted on both universes? Right. Confessions to make. I'm not big into the whole Marvel DC movie thing. I'll watch them. I'll be entertained for a couple of hours, but I'm not there queuing on the first day to watch them. I'm not burning through the latest Netflix series of Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Iron Man. I've not even started on Luke Cage yet and Iron Fist. I've not even watched them. I'm still probably only about halfway through Jessica Jones. I've watched the first season of Daredevil, but again, it's just nothing that I'm like want to rush in and watch it and get super excited like so many people do. I haven't still seen things like Ant-Man. I haven't seen Superman v Batman. There's so many of them that I haven't seen yet, but I will get round to them and I'll enjoy them for what they are, but I'm not like gnashing at my teeth for the latest one. So looking to what I'd like to see up there was a little bit difficult, and to be honest, I could only find 3 that I thought, that would be interesting if they could. And one of them is one that I already know, there's been rumblings about it for so long, but I don't want them to make a movie out of. I want them to do it as a TV show because it will be better suited in that format. And I'll kick that one off, and that is Neil Gaiman's Sandman. It's been rumoured for so many years, and it's something that I would actually like to see adapted, but it has to be as a TV show. The scope of Neil Gaiman's vision in this book cannot be held in a 2.5 hour movie. It will ruin it and no one will want to touch it ever again. But as a TV show, it will do so well, and just making sure, you know, you obviously get the characters right, the feel of the book right, and as long as Neil Gaiman's got his finger in that pie and making sure it's all to his vision. And I know I haven't seen it yet, but there's The American Gods, his novel that they've adapted for TV. I know he had a lot to do with that, so I know he will. If this ever gets off the ground, I hope he does have as much input as he does with American Gods. Batman, we've had some great movies through Christopher Nolan, but one of the storylines that I was hoping they would do at some point was Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's The Long Halloween. This is another of my favourite Batman runs. And it's got so much style about it, and so many of Batman's rogue gallery that can be used to make probably you know how like the movie industry love to break these films up now and give you part 1 and part 2s. This could probably do well as a 2-part movie, but I would really like to see that. Looking at the Marvel side, they've had so many out already. It was actually a little bit difficult, so I was thinking, well, what characters haven't they used yet that I personally like, that could do well? And the only one I could think of really was Moon Knight. I think this could work really well, especially. I mean, he is in some respects he's Batman, but over at Marvel, but with the extra dimension of all his kind of split personalities that we've seen being used in Jeff Lemire's latest run over at Marvel. So I'd quite like to see Moon Knight involved in the Marvel universe film movie style. And we'll all go, oh, they won't do it justice, and then we'll like it, and then some people will poo-poo it. Some people think it's great, you know, opinions. Yeah. So, again, the movies are not my thing, but again, I'll watch them if they're on. Alright, so on to the next question from the Batman himself, Joshua Hayes. And of course, it was going to be about Batman. And he asked me, what is your favourite experience with a Batman? And well, you've already seen it earlier on in the video, and it's true. I absolutely dig Batman Nightfall. The whole series, you've got The Broken Bat, part 2 of Who Rules the Night, and Night's End. I just lapped this up when I first read it and was just so excited about the whole kind of gauntlet that Batman was running, having so many of the Batman villains that I knew from having collected Batman here and there, and just seeing them kind of all together in one big huge storyline, provoking Batman, wearing him down, and all to the point where, you know, he's broken. And what would happen after that? Who was going to take on the mantle of the Bat, and how wrong that all went, and was Bruce Wayne ever going to come back and put on the cowl? And it was just so entertaining, you know. And you had the Robins, the Nightwings, Catwoman in there. There was so much that I just enjoyed, and it was just fun. And that was what it was. There was an excitement about it, and I just, what is this? So much good stuff about this that I loved. With all the villains, each of the kind of more minor characters getting their little spotlight in the story, and I don't think I've really read another kind of ongoing storyline like this again that I enjoyed as much. I tried out and collected them all the War Games storyline after coming back into Batman with a big huge event that they were doing, and I collected every single part of War Games, even the non-Batman titles like Catwoman and Robin, and I think Batgirl got thrown in there as well, but nothing ever lived up to the fun and excitement, enjoyment I got from this little trio of books. Next question. It is from Lynx888, and they asked, what was the first comic you read? Oh, that is a tough one, and I don't think I can tell you what the specific issue and title was. I think we all come to comic books in a very different way, from many different avenues, and obviously as a UK based inhabitant person on the planet, my first real kind of foray into comics was very much at a young age, with the British publications, things that you probably don't necessarily think of as comics per se, things like the Beano and the Dandy, which were just like kind of funny strips that maybe lasted a page or 2 pages, farcical, lots of kids trying to get one up on all the adults. Then there were comics like Whoopee, and I think there was one called Shiver and Shake, and there were all sorts. They were all pretty much the same kind of basic concept, but just with a different title on. And then as I kind of gradually grew older, there was the Eagle, with its photo strip comic books, I guess you'd call them. And then there were things for the more mature reader, I guess you would, the more adult reader. Mature makes it sound like it was pornographic, but there were titles like Crisis and Toxic and Revolver, which felt very much like kind of like an underground zine kind of comic book, dealing with very big issues but in a comic book format. And this is going back to the 80s, so there was a lot of politics in there. There was a lot of kind of hedonistic lifestyles with drugs and that kind of thing, the psychedelia aspect of it all. My earliest memories of reading American comic books was probably the late 70s. I don't know who was buying them, because I wasn't, because I didn't have the money for them, but there were Batman and Superman comics lying around, so I would have been reading them, and I suppose they were my very first American comic style books and titles that I was reading. Now, our young was keeping an eye on my background in a lot of my videos. I'm obviously sat here, and as you can see behind me, there are lots and lots of stacks of long boxes behind me. And they asked me, what is your favourite single issue in box E and F? And he did say he was very kind, because he did actually want to, I think he said wanted me to pick something out of G, but he didn't want me to have to pull this out and then get into G, which is very kind of him. Unfortunately, box E and G, I'm not saying it wasn't bad, because I've got a corker of a comic here, but there just wasn't a great lot to choose from. So I went with this, and it's quite kind of apt, I guess. Because of the artist on here who has just recently passed away. But my favourite issue out of that box was the 2012 Frankenstein Alive, Alive, written by Steve Niles, drawn by Bernie Wrightson. Unfortunately, this never got finished, but the artwork in these books were just phenomenal, and you realise why these took so long to come out. This was by no means a monthly solicited book. I think 3 issues in all came out, but as you can imagine from Bernie Wrightson, the amazing amount of detail that he put into these books. He is a creator that will be sorely missed. His work just will live on forever. Now, Ryan Greer asked that age-old question that is always at the forefront of our minds when we go and pick up our new books. The price of new comics. Too high, low, or just right? Well, I think we can all agree that I wouldn't say it was just right, and it certainly isn't too low. Is it too high though? This is a difficult question. Yes, we would love our comic books to be cheaper, but they never will. Let's put that out there. They will either stay as they are now at this $3.99 price that DC and Marvel certainly like to push up. I don't see those comics ever coming down in price. Obviously, a lot of us, for the comics we're buying, and they're coming out twice a month, it's almost double the price. And yes, we do appear to be getting fewer pages for our buck, for our pounds. So yes, they are an expensive luxury item, and I say that because although yes, my passion is comic books, my hobby is comic books, I love to read my comic books, but it is an expensive habit. As many more people know than me, I don't know how the likes of Oddfellow's Thoughts, Travis, manages to pay for up to and including 30 odd books a week, let alone me who struggles when it's 10 or 11 a week. But you know, we have our money, we spend it as we see fit, and I'm sure no one, and I hope no one, is putting themselves under any financial duress to get the latest comic book rather than maybe eat or have a roof over their head. I have been down that road, I talk from experience, and I never want to go back there again. That was the black year when I had to give up comics and sort my financial life out. So maybe that's probably why I don't buy as many comics as I used to, though back in the day they were obviously that much more cheaper, but I wasn't earning as much money. So maybe I'm growing. I want to use my money for something else other than these glorious picture books. And we've made it to our final question, and that comes from Parker's Alive. And oh, this was a tough one. I had to think about this, and I don't even know if this is a good enough answer, but it's the answer this person is going to get. What was the comic that started you off collecting seriously, and what do you remember about the day you bought it? Now, my comic book life experience of collecting has stopped and started so many times. I could say that when I seriously started buying comic books was when I was probably picking up the British publications of, and I've spoken about them just a few minutes ago, the likes of Crisis and Revolver, and those British publications with the more adult feel to them. I just fell in love with the medium, than what it was what it could possibly do then. And I was aware obviously of the American comics, but I was always buying them in the British reprints, and as much as I loved them, there was nowhere that I knew of to begin with to seek these out and get them on a regular basis. Then I was at art college doing a performing arts degree, and there was a comic book shop tucked away, as they usually are, down a narrow pathway hidden away from the main street, and I saw X-Force issue #1. Yes, that one, the original, and I picked that up, and I went back every month to pick up the next issue and the next issue and the next issue. I didn't buy anything else. It was just that one issue, and my god, those months dragged when I was waiting for the next issue, but I used to collect all of those. And then I stopped and life changed, and then it was when I came here to where I live now in Northampton, and I'd finished college when I was doing my combined honours degree. and the comic book shop that I still use to this date. So this was going back to April 2002. I picked up Uncanny X-Men issue number 404. There's nothing special about this book whatsoever. It's written by Joe Casey and artwork by Sean Phillips. And I went into the comic book store and I saw this, and I say the cover isn't particularly spectacular. I knew about the X-Men, I knew what the X-Men were all about, so I thought, hey, what the hell, let's pick this up. Let's see what's going on with this book. And I can't honestly say what other books that I picked up at the time, but I didn't really know what I was picking up. But from that moment on, until my year of having to give up comic books to get myself sorted, I guess that was the moment that I decided comic books, they're for me, they are going to become my life, and they have become a very, very big part of my life. I just remember the store, it's moved since, the business just moved down the street, but it used to be on the corner of a kind of almost a main junction type road, and it was very dark and gloomy in there. The shopkeeper didn't look particularly inviting, as in, you know, oh, a new customer, let's go and see what he's about. And I just picked up random books off the shelf, of which, as I said, this was one of them. And that's it. Those were all my questions that you kindly gave to me for my 7-year anniversary on YouTube here. And as I said right at the top of this, let's hope for 7 more years to come. We will see how the comic book industry goes from here. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for many more videos to come, and also comment down below. If you had a question that you were burning to ask and you missed out, put it in the box below and I will answer it down there instead. Until next time, take care, bye bye.